One of the primary reasons video games are made is to entertain gamers. That is why we have so many amazing games out there that make it hard for some to contain themselves. But as great as they are, sometimes you get your hands on the game, and whether the game's good or bad, some games will leave you with an empty feeling inside because of how much more could have been done. And if you haven't seen the title, that's what I'm here to talk about. Just remember that I don't hate all of these games. I hate a couple of them, but not all of them. So, for my 100th countdown, at least out of the ones that have been up for more than a day, it's time for me to vent out some of my disappointment. The first Final Fantasy was pretty decent. Final Fantasy II was fun, but the third one, not really. The fourth game was what made the series into one of my favorite RPG franchises. So what about 5? It's good, but there's not that much I can think of. Unlike in the last game where you get a lot of different party members, Final Fantasy V decided to have you stick with mostly the same party throughout the game, with only one of them being switched out. The music's good, but not nearly as beautiful as the music in its predecessor. But my biggest problems with this game are its storyline and characters. The plot? Ha! Who needs a good plot in a franchise that's known for mostly good storytelling? Characters? They don't need personality. Now I'll give this a tiny bit of leeway because I did hear that the story wasn't meant to be taken seriously and was supposed to be a satire of the past games. However, they do a poor job at telling us that. And even when they don't hide as much, they don't seem like they're intended for humor. Well, at least not for most of the time. To some, it's pretty obvious, but the fact that it took everyone years to find this out should indicate something. I'm not asking for them to constantly blurt out that this is a parody to the point of treating their audience like idiots, but at least give some hints that I can catch on. I do like this game. This is exactly why 4, 6, and 7 were much better games in my book, because those games use their full potential as Final Fantasy titles. When I first played Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, I fell in love with it almost instantly. One of the most spectacular soundtrack in the series, which is saying something considering how great the music in the franchise is. The first instance of a Fire Emblem game in 3D, where they do a great job showing off the backgrounds in combat, where 4 are used for weapons and 4 are used for items. How amazing! So naturally, I went into the sequel, Radiant Dawn, expecting another outstanding adventure. And what do we get? Bland music, which mostly consists of fog, characters with forgettable personalities when compared to its predecessor, maps that you'll easily forget, a storyline that's just as memorable to an average person as it is to someone with short-term memory loss. I could suffer from amnesia and it wouldn't make a difference. This is especially disappointing since this is one of those types of games where you keep switching between different party members. That is an awesome idea, but even that didn't make up for the problems I previously listed. Congratulations, Radiant Dawn. You get a prize for being the only Fire Emblem game that I hate. I haven't played Sonic and the Secret Rings, because I've heard everyone say that it has atrocious controls. But I have played its sequel, Sonic and the Black Knight. I love the Sonic 3D formula, but I do like seeing them throw sword physics into the mix. And it could have been one of the better Sonic spin-offs. I'll admit, Caliburn isn't as annoying as I remember him being, but some of the missions are going through the same levels and giving rings to people. Ordinarily, I don't mind repeating sections as long as they don't overdo it, but giving them to these twits gets on my nerves. Who the heck adds quick time events to something as simple as giving rings? What other great ideas did you have? Making a quick time event out of sheathing and unsheathing Caliburn? And if you don't press the buttons in time, these nincompoops won't accept rings anymore. Who came up with that idea? You also fight the same 4 out of 5 enemy types throughout the game, it's way too linear, and the controls are pretty restrictive. It's a great game, but it struggles to get into my favorite Sonic games list. I didn't want to talk about Pokemon Colosseum again. Not because I dislike it, but because I've already ranted on this game twice in the past. But if I have to, then fine. As I've stated, the battles are way too plentiful, even for an RPG. Because of that, the game feels like a glorified Pokemon battle rush. I've also claimed how shallow the overworlds are. None of the awesome puzzles that make the overworlds in the other games are present here, making the battles even more repetitive. Okay, here's a new complaint I neglected to bring up. The list of available Pokemon you can get is very small, so you don't have as many options for cool rosters, especially since obtainable Hoenn Pokemon are few and far between. Look, I get that they needed to get some Pokemon that weren't in the national decks. But even then, when Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald came out, most of the Colosseum exclusive Pokemon weren't Colosseum exclusive anymore. The only reason I should keep this game is to get the Johto starters and Ho-Oh. I'm kinda glad I have it, but the game itself had so much wasted potential. Thank goodness Gale of Darkness fixed most of Colosseum's issues, while retaining that more serious tone. Oh, Skyward Sword, how harsh I've been on you. Though I've stated multiple times that I hate it, I do recall some great memories I had with it, so it's not as bad as I remember. But then, after seeing the Let's Plays of it, now I don't blame myself for hating it initially. Here's how buying it went when it came out. You go to GameStop, pick it up, then go back home and play it. You find out that you can't play it without a Wii Motion Plus accessory. So you go back to GameStop, and then play this game, and you're in for some good and bad times. The graphics are supposedly a blend of Wind Waker's cartoony graphics with Twilight Princess's realistic ones. The blend works in areas like Elden Volcano, but in Skyloft it's as good as writing with permanent marker over crayon. Since that's just one area, I wouldn't mind that so much if you didn't spend so much time in Skyloft. It takes about 80 minutes to even leave Skyloft for the first time. You keep going back to advance the plot, and that's not even counting the side quests. Also, flying on your loft wing isn't inspiring either. And no, it's not because it will brainwash kids into commit suicide, like I thought it would. Instead of being great and atmospheric like watching Harry Potter riding on Buckbeak, it feels dumb with the slow speed, cliched music, and uninspired scenery. So yeah, if we're gonna be stuck here for over an hour, can the starting area at least look somewhat pleasing? While we're at it, let's talk about the gameplay. It's good, and I was wrong about the controls. They do respond, except that the enemies have better AI making them more of a threat. What I do have a complaint about is the lack of exploration that makes Zelda so great. And then there's the biggest flaw. The constant spewing of obvious reminders. Fi telling you what any baby can see for themselves, and the collectibles pause your game to tell you what they are every time you pick them up after pressing reset, even if you have 100 of them. Once again, I like this game now, but thanks to its issues, it fails to stand out among the other 5 major 3D Zelda titles, making it look even more inferior. Rayman. A classic charm up there with Sonic and Mario with some of the greatest of classics. It's just so much fun to play through. That's what I thought it was going to be. Nope. What do we get instead? One of the most frustrating experiences of my life. As if Ristar wasn't hair-pulling enough, here we have Rayman to prove us wrong. Don't let the nice graphics and beautiful music deceive you. The game's so impossible that it either feels like they were made by the creators of a Kaizo ROM hack, or they require sequence breaking to do. That's something you should avoid when making a video game. Pitfalls and spikes are nearly everywhere. Even by platformer standards, don't you think this is overkill? Enemies always come out of nowhere when you least expect them. You can be merely walking forward and then BAM! Enemies fly right in front of you like half a second before impact. I can guarantee that the majority of your deaths in this game will not be your fault. Extra lives are also extremely scarce, even though you're going to need them. Sometimes I literally get the feeling that they made this game terrible on purpose to make some kind of sick joke. That probably isn't the case, but if it is, then that's something you never do in video games. You never make a game bad on purpose. And if Rayman 2 and 3 are frustrating too, count me out of this franchise. Disclaimer, I apologize to any Rayman fan who was offended by this entry. I've talked about Dream Drop Distance before, but I gotta do it again. This is a fun Kingdom Hearts game, with a dreamlike atmosphere and the amazing flow motion abilities. How do you take away from the experience? Let's get rid of all your lovable Disney party members, which include beloved characters such as Simba, Aladdin, and Peter Pan, take away the Heartless, and replace the party members and Heartless with stuffed animals. While we're at it, let's have only 5 Disney worlds and have most of them being in alternate parts of worlds we've already seen before. And let's have one of the original worlds be one where the villain can't handle himself, and the other original world be where the villain has already been fought before in a previous game. Seriously, after Kingdom Hearts 2, the only Disney villain we got to fight that wasn't seen in an earlier installment was Gantu. Well, we do get to fight Julius after beating the final boss, but that was the villain of an episode and not a full-fledged Disney film. I guess it's better than nothing, but come on! What's the last way to hurt an otherwise good game? By ruining my favorite video game villain. How? It'll contain huge spoilers, so skip to this time frame if you haven't beaten the game. Okay, back in Kingdom Hearts 2, one of the things that made the organization so awesome was their unique goal. They didn't want to take over the world. All they wanted was to have hearts of their own so they could actually exist. Well, it turns out that was a big fat lie. They ruined this by revealing that the real goal was to become 13 vessels for Xehanort. That's stupid. You had a perfect villain motivation, and you ruined that. Square Enix, how could you do this to us? You had what could have been one of the greatest Kingdom Hearts games, and what we got was still decent, but could have been so much more. Well, now wait for Kingdom Hearts 3, because it looks like it'll use more of its potential than this game did. The Mario & Luigi RPG series is one of the best series in the Mario franchise. With fun and addicting games such as Superstar Saga and Partners in Time, you will be likely to enjoy at least one of these fun adventures. But not all of them were games I would play through again. Mario & Luigi Dream Team is a good example of this. Is Dream Team bad? Not necessarily. It's actually pretty fun. Until you get to the 70% mark. When I first played through this game, I went from, I don't want this game to end anytime soon, to, when will this game end? The amount of times they send you to the dream worlds is just mind-blowing. I understand there's a reason it's called Dream Team, but honestly, they don't even feel all that dreamlike. They just feel like side-scrolling versions of levels that you're in, with faded colors and uninspiring music, especially since you spend over half the game in them. Even the Luiginary abilities get dull after a while. At least Dream Drop Distance was able to get the dream feeling right. Now I have even more sympathy for Luigi, because his dreams are so predictable. Well, I guess that getting boring after a while does kind of fit with the whole sleep thing of this game setting. But this is a game where you go into dreams. The least you could do is make it, I don't know, atmospheric. Make it feel like more than just a faded side-scroller of an area you're in. My other problem is how despite the fact that we get this great new villain called Antasma, we don't get to see enough of him, since Bowser does much more than Antasma does throughout the course of the game. Overall, I do like Dream Team a little, but the only reason I even played through it a second time was so I can challenge the bosses on hard mode. Metroid Other End. Well, 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 look at what we have here. The game that disappointed thousands of people around the world. How? Well, if you couldn't tell by the amount of backlash this game got, the gameplay's decent in some points. Other times I have to ask, why did they make Samus walk so painfully slow for literally no reason at times? Why can you not move around in first person view? And who in their right mind came up with these stupid search segments to look for stuff that'll sometimes blend in with the background? Other M also has only 3 main sectors to it, while Fusion had 6. The story is arguably the worst part of Other M, since the pacing is always interrupted by Samus continuing to whine and whine and whine about the death of the infant Metroid that sacrificed its life for her. That is not how you honor its memory. The infant Metroid wouldn't want you to let it get in the way of being serious during your missions. This game turned Samus from an epic, strong, independent woman into a whiny little brat. You want to know what the saddest part of it all is? I can't bring myself to hate this game. Yeah, this game's bad. It's really, really bad. And I think it would have been better if this game was never made. But for some reason, whenever people say it's a bad game, I just can't bring myself to agree with them for some reason. But one thing's for certain, it still deserves its spot on this list. And even though this game wasn't responsible for the series' hiatus, maybe we wouldn't have thought that if Nintendo had, I don't know, given us a word about it. For Samus' sake, please redeem her in Prime 4. Mega Man X was an outstanding game. Taking the classic Mega Man formula, enhancing the graphics and action, giving you more abilities, and adding somewhat of a story to it. What we got paid off, for we were given one of the most rockin' titles on the Super NES. How do you mess it up? How about you take away everything that made the first game memorable and bring little to no innovation whatsoever? And as such, Mega Man X2 is born. It feels like a cash-in sequel. Oh wait, it is one. It has as much innovation as a ROM hack. The first game had a lot of memorable Mavericks. The only ones I can recall off the top of my head in this one, on the other hand, are Crystal Snail and Wire Sponge. And even then, that's only because their names remind me of SpongeBob. Outside of that, their abilities are incredibly forgettable when compared to the first game. Their stages aren't as well thought out as the first. Basically, they left a lot to be desired. Even the music is unmemorable. The story is also bad. Not only because they somehow brought a certain character back, despite being turned into nothing in the first game, but they also brought in 3 of the blandest side villains seen in a long time. The X-Hunters have flat personalities, little impact on the story, and one more reason they'll contain spoilers, so go to this time frame if you don't want to be spoiled. They are shoved aside near the end for the sake of bringing back Sigma, because regardless of there being a new take on Mega Man, we still need to reuse our main antagonists instead of making new ones. And as I previously mentioned, it has barely any innovation. The only innovation to the gameplay that I can think of is the Ride Chaser. Otherwise, this is a game that ruined the X series for me. Since this game was bad, X3 was actually worse, X4 was pretty okay, and would have been great if it weren't for the voice acting, which by the way is worse than nails on a chalkboard. And I haven't played X5 and on, so I wouldn't know. But if what people say about them is anything to go by, then that means the first X is the only good game in the X series. When a game sequel not only fails to innovate, but also ruins the series as early as 1 year after its first game came out, that's enough to put X2 at the #1 spot on this list.
Y'all get a Peter Pan right here off of this stamp!